I got. Hi guys. Brian Clan, you're cute. You're supposed to be in the movie. I know you'll be going to watch it. That's. Thanks for coming to say hi anyway. I'm gonna let Moo know. I let Davita know. Okay. Hi, LMNW50. No, they're not. It's funny though. Um, do you guys want spooky Florida or spooky California? I'm the one getting in trouble, Brian Clan. It's a members movie night, so people that aren't members can come over here. Hi, Tracy. California? Okay. Hi, Lori Collie. Oh, you're in. Brian Clan's in California too. You're never over here anymore. So I forgot about that. Davita is down by the by the isn't she by the Marine base? Or am I confused about that? Aw, Tracy. And then you go over to Carolyn's and tell her the same thing. Uh-oh, there she is, Tracy. You got busted. You guys are all busted. Oh, Tracy. Oh, oh, Danielle. Lisa H. You guys are funny. Hi, QB. Big Mama. Kristen, that's cute. Hi, my boo, Lisa. This is so funny. Hi, Larky. I am. I'm bad like that. I better get started. Big Mama, you're gonna get in big trouble, Big Mama. Hi, Monica. Uh-oh. Monica, she's already here. She's checking out to see who's here. Hey, Nicole Griffith. Carolyn, you better get that movie started. Okay, here we go. Carolyn, please, no more joking. This is very serious. Lori Kelly. Please, Carolyn. This is very unprofessional. Big Mama, it's so funny. Carolyn thinks you and Brian Klein are the same person. Now, Carolyn, you've had your fun. Carolyn, this is a Patreon meeting for the Scooter Gang. No, it's not a breakup. She just likes to do this because she has taken all my subs. She's poached them. Brian Clan, I used to have 40,000. All of a sudden, you know my sub count. And somehow Carolyn has 40,000. Hi, Angie. Yeah, I do a little bit, but I'm going to start reading and get all serious now. Because she really will be yelling at me tomorrow. She'll be yelling her head off. But I'm used to it. And I say, I won't do it again. I won't. Brian Clan. It's okay. We are too. Okay. Hi, everybody. The way YouTube says, greet people that may be watching in a replay. Hi, I'm very happy you're here. I hope you enjoy these stories today. We're going with Spooky California. These are tales of hauntings, strange happenings, and other local lore. And I hope you are too, Nicole. Love you too, Tracy. Introduction. Hi, LMNW50, or bye. What's so spooky about California? Isn't this the land of sunshine, Hollywood, and beautiful vistas? Indeed it is, but it is also the place where Bigfoot roams in the North Woods, where the spirits of Argonauts still pan for gold, where a dead mother still attends to the needs of her newborn infant. Carolyn. Now, Carolyn, calm down. She did not yell at you. No, she did not. Oh, I meant to block that person. Brian Clan, why aren't you a moderator here anymore? That's weird. Why? Did you take yourself off or something? Why not? You don't want to be? I just realized that. Carolyn and Big Mama, please block one another so you don't have to see one another. Yeah, let me give it back. I don't know what happened. Oh, I think I do. Never. It wasn't anything against you. I had to get, yeah. There you go. Okay. Where a dead mother still attends to the needs of her newborn infant, and where a ghost ship sails across the desert on the invisible waters of a long dead sea. As a child, I visited California with my grandparents on a cross-country RV trip. No, she's just teasing, Tracy. My first memories of this beautiful state consist of very tall trees, a pumpkin coach, and a large conch shell, the biggest shell I have ever found. Hey, I was only 6. My first trip to California as an adult was to Monterey. I am the quintessential tourist. I could be in the darkest reaches of the Amazon, and instinct would lead me unerringly to the one village where some enterprising local had set up a tour of the huts, a hot dog stand, and a souvenir shop. So the first thing I did when I arrived was to sign up for a bus tour of Monterey and Carmel. The history of the missions, the story of the former capital of California, and the way the land changed as it moved from Spanish hands to Mexican and finally to American fascinated me. But what I enjoyed most about Monterey and the surrounding towns was the plethora of spooky stories that haunted the area. Perhaps my favorite Monterey Carmel folktale is the story in which a priest is attacked by a thief on his way to minister a sick member of his parish. The thief is brought to a very harsh sentence of justice thanks to a hen and her chicks. Then there is the tale of the lady in lace who haunts the roadways near Pebble Beach. Though my guided tour took me along the 17-mile drive and past the ghost tree, I, alas, did not spot this mysterious spirit. Carmel and Monterey are not the only spooky spots in California. A blood stain appears on the porch of a haunted house near Fort Bragg, just before the manifestation of the murder victim. The ghostly Jake and his camels roam the Sierra Nevada. A headless man longs for his lover in Hollywood. A serpent lurks beneath the waters of Lake Tahoe, and the devil pays a visit to a prisoner in Los Angeles. Hi, Purple Minion Star. No, I don't. What was your name before? Or was it always that? I would think I would remember that. Good night, Carolyn. I love you, my child. I'm sure you're out of here now. It was the same. It does sound familiar. Thank you. I appreciate you coming, though. Coming back. I remember spending one memorable evening during a recent trip to San Francisco, chasing the supernatural on a local ghost tour. Though our trail led us up and down the streets of San Francisco, I did not manage to bump into the ghost of the bandit Joaquin, the spirit of murdered Ishi, vengeance, or the boogeyman, who cannot seem to keep track of his head. Yeah, I probably did, Purple Minion. Sorry. But I remember you now. I won't forget. A large number of spooky stories in California focus on a treasure of one sort or another. In one story, a miner strikes it rich, thanks to the assistance of the Tommyknockers. Of course, some weren't so lucky. In another story, one of the Argonauts takes over the claim of a dead miner and finds himself being chased out by a very angry ghost. Then there's the story from San Diego, in which the sound of phantom bells may guide listeners to buried treasure or to their deaths, depending on which version you choose to believe. As an adult, it took me maybe 30 seconds to fall in love with California. I don't know if it was the architecture, the history, or the warm sunshine and cool breezes, but I was caught, hook, line, and sinker, from the moment I arrived in Monterey, and my infatuation only grew with subsequent visits to both Northern and Southern California. I really cannot blame the old timer who retired in Sacramento and found the balmy climate of California so much to his liking that he just never did get around to dying. Yeah, this is about California, Brian Clan. His great great grandchildren finally encouraged him to travel outside the state, and sure enough, he died after living for a few weeks on the East Coast. Of course, his relatives then made the mistake of bringing him back to California to be buried. Now, when I retire, I'm going to move into the house right next door to that old timer. And believe me, I won't make the mistake of letting my great great grandkids send me on a trip out of state. No, sir. And that's from Sandy Schlosser, the writer of the book. Okay, part one, ghost stories. It's called Milk Bottles from Yuba City. I took over the family business when my father died. We owned the most successful grocery in town, and money was coming in hand over fist until the Great Depression hit. Even then, things weren't too bad for me and the missus. After all, people still needed food and supplies to go on living, so the townsfolk kept coming to our store. I kept prices reasonable, unlike some of my fellow merchants, so folks came to us long after the other stores went out of business. We managed to scrape by with enough food to feed our twin sons, and even had a small toy or two to give them at Christmas. My wife had a talent for making wonderful toys out of the odds and ends left over at the store, which came in real handy during the holidays. Yes, we had a good life, even in those hard times. Our only sorrow was the lack of a little daughter in our lives. I hope that TV's not too loud. Dave has turned it down, but hi, Steph. Glad you showed up. Wish I could block the sound out. The doctor told me and the missus that we couldn't have any more children. One less mouth to feed, my wife said bravely when she heard the news, but I knew she was smarting inside. Every once in a while, when one of our customers came into the store with their baby girl, my wife would get teary-eyed and duck into the back room to compose herself. Sometimes she wouldn't come out until the baby was gone. I wanted to help her, but what could I say? I was smarting inside too. Okay, good. About a month after our visit to the doctor, a new face appeared in my store. A small, thin woman with dark hair, a narrow face, and faded blue eyes stood peering in the window. Just another poor, bedraggled woman struggling to feed her family, I thought. I saw them all the time, their faces careworn and blank. The Great Depression had created hundreds of them. Seeing them always reminded me that I was one of the lucky ones who still had enough money to feed my family. Caroline. I knew all my customers, as well as everyone who lived and worked in the neighborhood, but I had never seen this woman before. Carolyn, just listen to the story. You know you want to. She must be one of the migrant workers come to town to help with the harvest, I thought. Here for a few weeks and then gone with the wind. Damn you. After hesitating on the doorstep for a few moments, she came into my shop carrying 2 empty milk bottles. Wordlessly, she placed them on the counter in front of me. I gazed into her eyes, waiting for her to ask something. She just stood there looking at me hopefully. Perhaps she doesn't speak English, I thought. I took the empty bottles and replaced them with full bottles. Taking in her tattered dress and worn face, I asked for only half the price going. Michael. Big Mama. You guys are so cute. See, Carolyn wants to listen. She does. She knows she does. I wasn't really surprised when she didn't reply. Probably she had no money at all. I watched her pick up the milk bottles and leave the shop. I suppose I could have gone after her to demand my money or called the police, but I did neither. I saw the need in her careworn face. Oh, here's an illustration of it. This looks like it could have been a decoupage thing, Carolyn. You guys are so funny. I'm like even too tired to laugh tonight, but it's just great. I'll be laughing about it later when I'm all rested up. A long time ago, I decided that no one in my neighborhood was going to starve. Not while my grocery was still open. Nancy. The woman was back the next day with 2 empty milk bottles. She placed them on the counter, still wordless. Again, I looked deep into her eyes as I replaced the empty bottles with full ones. Again, she took the milk without paying and hurried out the door. She looked so worried that I began to wonder if she had a job at all. Perhaps someone at home was sick and she'd have to quit her job to nurse them. That night, over dinner, I told my wife about the woman. She suggested that I offer the woman a part-time position cleaning the store if she came again. I was pleased with her suggestion and decided to do so at the next opportunity. My wife is a gem of a woman. Given the chance, I would marry her again. Good morning, Leslie Romani. The woman came the next morning. For the third time, she exchanged her empty bottles for full without saying a word. I tried to talk to her, telling her about the part-time position cleaning the store, but she acted as if she did not hear me. Her blue eyes were desperate, and she practically ran from the store with the milk. Her urgency worried me. I hesitated for a moment, then closed up the grocery and followed her, wondering what I could do to help. To my surprise, the woman headed away from the migrant camp. She walked rapidly, head down, across town, and went into the local graveyard. I followed, puzzled. What was she doing here? As I watched, the woman hurried up to a stone marker and then disappeared into the ground. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. She had melted into the ground like a ghost. I shivered, suddenly chilled by what I had seen. And then I heard the muffled cry of a baby coming from the ground underneath the stone marker where the woman had disappeared. It was a weary cry, as if the baby had been weeping for a long time and no longer expected anyone to come to it. For a long moment, I was frozen to the spot. Then I came to my senses and ran back to the store to phone the police. Within minutes, the graveyard was swarming with people. Several workers started digging up the grave where I had heard the crying. When the casket was opened, I saw the woman who had visited my store lying dead within it. In her arms, she held a small baby girl and 2 full milk bottles. That just gave me the creeps. I was going to say chills. I wish you guys could see. I think you can. No, you can't. But I do. I have chills. The infant was still alive. The police rushed the baby to the hospital, where she spent several days being nursed back to health. I brought my wife several times to visit the tyke while she was at the hospital. We spoke to the proper authorities about adopting her, as she had no family other than the mother with whom she had been buried. By the time she was ready to leave the hospital, she was officially ours. We named her Helen, which was the name on her mother's grave. We still have the milk bottles that her mother's ghost used to save her life. When she is older, we will tell her the story. Hi, Pitbull Sleuth. Carol. Hi, Jennifer Rochelle. Carolyn, come on. No. No. That's what I always do to Carolyn. When I think she's upset with me about something, because only, maybe she doesn't answer right away or something, I always say, I'm going to take NyQuil. I'm going to take a whole bottle of it. Now she's saying, take the NyQuil. Hi, Jeanette. I'm glad you're here. Wasn't that creepy, though? QB. Right, Michael? Yeah, she's taking names. That's right, I know. No. She's yelling at me on the phone, I think. Or wait. I think there is something here from her. Or wait, no, there's not. Sorry, guys. Okay. The next one, number 2, chapter 2, The Spook of Misery Hill, Pike City, Sierra County. Oh, thank you, Pitbull. Invisible messages. I thought it was Carolyn going to yell at me, but it's not. No one ever thought Jim Brandon would amount to much. Kinder folks called him thriftless. His creditors used less kindly terms, and Jim would walk the other way if he saw any one of them approaching. So we were all surprised when Jim took it in his head to work the abandoned mine on Misery Hill. Old Tom Bowers used to own the Misery Hill claim. He was a bit of a hermit, Tom was. He stayed out by the mine and didn't come to town much. He didn't like the rough crowd that gathered there to drink and spend their gold unwisely. One day, old Tom went missing, and we found him buried under a landslide. Despite a decent burial, old Tom's ghost kept walking around the mouth of the mine at night, scaring anyone who went near it. At least that's what folks claimed. Hi, Kevin. Well, Jim Brandon decided the stories about the mine were all rot. He said to his mining with an industry of spirit quite out of character for him. He got the mine up and running, lickety-split, started paying off his creditors, and began making a name for himself among his fellow miners. One day, Jim came into the bar and complained bitterly about some upstart who was working the claim behind his back. How can you tell? Asked Red Thompson, one of Jim's buddies. Every morning when I get to the mine, the sluice is open and the water's turned on, Jim growled. I've searched high and low for that no-good claim jumper. Just wait until I get my hands on him. Okay, good, Kevin. I'm glad you're listening and relaxing. You've been on it all day. Sounds like somebody's playing a joke on you, Red said calmly. They'll wish they hadn't messed about with me when I get through with them, said Jim, slamming his fist down on the top of the bar for emphasis. Maybe it's old Tom Bowers come back to work his claim, Lester Mann called out from his place farther down the bar. That's nonsense, Jim Brandon replied, and stomped out of the bar. Everyone chuckled a bit at the joke being played on Jim, and then forgot about it. But Jim was sure it wasn't a joke. Someone was jumping his claim, and he aimed to stop it. That night, Jim loaded up his rifle and crept noiselessly toward his camp, waiting for the claim jumper to appear. The wind was whispering eerily through the trees overhead, and the moonlight kept flitting in and out of the clouds. Jim's skin prickled, and he gave a sudden shiver of fear. There was no sound except for the wind and the murmur of the river. No night creature called, no hoot from an owl. Jim didn't like it one bit. The moon disappeared behind a large cloud. In the darkness, Jim saw something shining ahead of him. Goosebumps broke out on his skin. Okay, good, Jeanette. I'm glad you're going to listen. Jim had to draw a few calming breaths and mutter aloud, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts, several times before he felt calm enough to walk toward the light. As he drew near, he saw a glowing piece of paper tacked to the trunk of a tamarack tree. The words on the paper said, Notice, I, Tom Bowers, claim this land for placer mining. Jim reeled backward with a gasp of terror and crouched down on the ground with his head between his knees for several long moments. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in ghosts, he mumbled over and over again. Suddenly, he was angry. That claim jumper is trying to play tricks on his mind, he thought. He leapt to his feet and reached out to rip the paper from the tree trunk. Immediately, the strength left his arm, and it fell limp at his side. Jim stood frozen in place, his body shaking. He closed his eyes, trying to convince himself that there was no notice on the tree. It was just a trick of the moonlight. When he opened his eyes, the glowing notice was gone. Jim drew in a shuddering breath, trying to pretend that everything was normal. Then he heard it, the sound of water through a sluice and the crunch of a pick and gravel. The glowing notice was instantly forgotten. Jim clutched his rifle and hurried toward the sluice. Behind him, the glowing notice reappeared on the tree, lighting the path toward the Misery Hill mine. Jim rounded the final corner and saw a man working at the sluice. Ugh. He brought his gun to his shoulder and took aim. As he fired off a shot, he got a good look at the man. The light from the glowing notice revealed a tall, lanky man with tangled white hair and a white beard covered with dirt and debris. The man's skin was gray and rotting, and his eyes blazed within fathomless dark sockets. The dead face, turning to look at Jim, was that of old Tom Bowers. Here's an illustration. Jim shouted in terror as the shot passed harmlessly through the dead miner's corpse. A look of deadly fury creased the withered, rotting face. Slowly, the ghost raised his pick and shovel, pointing them at Jim. Then old Tom sprang forward, his blazing eyes fixed on his quarry, and raced toward the terrified man. Jim screamed and ran for his life down the hill, through the woods, ducking under tree limbs, jumping over rocks, and scrambling through scrub. He could hear old Tom behind him, his dead feet pounding heavily on the ground. Neither the branches that pummeled Jim's face nor the rocks and rubble that tripped him seemed to bother the corpse. It was gaining on him. Jim saw the lights of Pike City ahead. The saloon was full of miners celebrating a new find. Jim could hear them dancing and singing and laughing. He pushed himself to the limit, desperate to reach the safety of the saloon. He was almost there when a pair of withered hands closed around his shoulders, tumbling him to the ground just a few feet shy of the lighted doorway. Inside the saloon, a horrible shriek cut through the din. The miners gasped, falling silent as the shriek rose higher and higher, hitting a note that shattered all the glasses in the saloon. Then it stopped. The men stared at each other, faces pale, bodies shaking. Some of the men's hands were bleeding from cuts they had received when their glasses shattered. A few of the bravest ventured out into the darkness. Jim Brandon's rifle lay in the road, just outside the light from the doorway. The ground around it was torn up, as if two people had been rolling and wrestling in the dirt. A few yards away, lying haphazardly as if they had been thrown aside at the last minute, were a pick and a shovel with the letters TB cut into the handle. There was nothing else. Jim Brandon was never seen again in Pike City. As for Misery Hill Mine, none of the local residents go near it. Those strangers passing through often report that they have heard the sluice running there at night. Old Tom Bowers. Next is chapter 3, Vengeance, San Francisco. When the samurai warrior Cain first came to California from Tokyo, he brought with him a new wife, the beautiful Ishi, Ishi. I'm just going to say Ishi or Ishi. I don't know. She was an ideal wife, gentle, attentive, and obedient, as well as a wonderful cook and homemaker. She always referred to Cain as husband in the old style, which pleased him greatly. Cain, Cain was the envy of his new neighbors, and he and Ishi lived for several years in happiness. But Cain was a proud man, the eldest child of indulgent parents, and he believed that nothing was too good for such a one as he. When a wealthy family of high rank moved into the neighborhood, Cain cast his eye upon their lovely daughter and desired her. Oh, great. The beauty and obedience of Ishi no longer pleased him. In his mind, Ishi was second best, and Cain plotted to rid himself of his unwanted wife so he could woo and win the fair Aiko. On the way home from a great banquet one stormy night, Cain pushed his young wife over the cliff into the bay. No one heard Ishi's scream through the howl of the wind and rain. No one suspected foul play when a distraught Cain came rushing back to the banquet hall, shouting for help because his poor wife had slipped in the mud and fallen over the edge of the cliff. The searchers found Ishi's broken body at dawn. Her long black hair was tangled with seaweed. Her beautiful face was crushed by the rocks on the beach, and her teeth were shattered. Cain acted the part of the bereaved husband to perfection. He gave Ishi a splendid funeral. It wasn't until he was alone in his house, after the neighbors had all gone away, that Cain relaxed and drank to his success. In a month, he would woo and wed the lovely Aiko, and her wealth would become his. Yeah, a long way down. Cain laid himself down upon his mat, rejoicing in the absence of Ishi and dreaming of his new love. Outside, the wind whipped against the house, making the walls rattle and shake. A stray breeze swept through the sleeping room with a sibilant whisper. Excuse me. Vengeance, vengeance, the breeze hissed and slapped the sleeping samurai. Vengeance, vengeance. Cain rolled over restlessly as the door to the room slowly slid open. Moonlight streamed through the doorway, waking the warrior. Cain sat up and blinked as a hideously broken figure slowly stepped into the room. The wind whipped its long, seaweed-tangled black hair over the dirty, blood-stained kimono. Its face was crushed and broken with one eyeball hanging by a thread from the socket. The ghost of Ishi reached out a bony hand toward her husband, smiling horribly through the shattered remains of her teeth. Vengeance, she whispered, stretching her blood-stained hand carelessly, caressingly toward Cain's face. Vengeance. Cain screamed in terror and tripped over the mat in his haste to flee from the dreadful figure. He leapt out of the window and ran to a neighbor's house, gibbering in fear. His neighbors, mistaking his fear for overwhelming grief, welcomed him into their home and insisted he spend the rest of the night with them. Cain tried to behave normally the next day, but as night fell, his hands began to shake with fear, and he could not bring himself to enter his house. Instead, the samurai took his mat to an abandoned house in the neighborhood, determined to sleep within its ruins so that the ghost of Ishi could not find him. He left a paper lantern burning over his mat to keep away the shadows, and finally fell into a dreamless sleep. At the stroke of midnight, the wind began whipping against the abandoned house, whistling through the cracks and causing the ivy growing through a break in the wall to sway and grasp like bony, blood-stained hands. Vengeance, the wind hissed. Cain woke with a start. Above him, the breeze tossed the lantern. The candle guttered, and the paper caught fire in several places. Slowly, two eyes burned themselves into the paper, and a wide, grinning mouth with the shattered remains of teeth took shape. Vengeance, the mouth whispered as the ivory hands reached out caressingly toward Cain. Vengeance. Cain grabbed his sword and hacked at the cloying and tangling vines. They were trying to strangle him, but he managed to free an arm and cut them away from his body. Above him, the face in the lantern laughed. Vengeance, it cried. I seek vengeance, husband. Cain broke free from the vines and fled from the abandoned house, followed by the sound of Ishi's laughter. He ran back to the neighbor's home and begged for shelter. Moved by the apparent grief of the samurai, they took him in and insisted he stay with them until the sharp edge of his sadness had blunted. This suited Cain well. While he stayed with his neighbors, the ghost of Ishi remained at bay. A month passed. Cain continued to play the bereaved husband and continued to sleep in his neighbor's house, but people began to notice that the grieving samurai would sometimes smile when in the company of Aiko. His friends and family and fellow warriors contrived to bring the two together as often as possible. One day over tea, two of Cain's fellow samurai suggested that Cain marry Aiko. Let me get a drink. Hiding his triumphant grin in his cup, Cain haltingly asked them if they thought it would be proper so soon after the passing of Ishi. Entirely proper, his friends assured him, as a gust of wind slammed against the inn where they drank, causing the walls to rattle and shake. A stray breeze swept through the room with a sibilant whisper. Vengeance. Vengeance. The breeze swirled through the steam, rising from the teapot, shaping it into the broken form of a woman. The eyes of Cain's warrior friends glazed over. They both leapt to their feet, drawing their swords. Cain ducked and parried their blows, shouting, "What is wrong? Why are you attacking me?" Vengeance, hissed the rattling wind. Vengeance, whispered the figure in the steam from the teapot, stretching its hand towards Cain's face. Vengeance, chanted the two samurai together, their faces rigid, their bodies under the control of Ishi's ghost. Cain upset the table, pouring hot water over his friends. As he fled out the inn door, he heard swearing and gasping at the sting of the hot water, as the sting of the hot water pulled the warriors from their trance. Cain did not pause until he reached a bend in the road. Only then did he look back. The giant broken figure of Ishi towered over the inn, her crushed face and lolling eyeball leering at him mockingly. Vengeance, she cried, stretching a hand caressingly toward him. Her bony arm grew longer and longer until it reached the place where Cain was standing, transfixed. At the last moment, Cain regained his senses and swung his sword at the hand, chopping it off. It fell to the ground at his feet and melted away. The towering ghost of Ishi laughed mockingly and vanished as Cain's friends came out the door of the inn. They remembered nothing of the ghost and were annoyed with their friend for spilling tea on them. Cain apologized many times before they would forgive him. Shaken though he was by the reappearance of the ghost, Cain was still determined to woo and win the fair Aiko. He approached his father the next morning and was given permission to marry the daughter. Cain moved back to his home that afternoon and began preparing the house for his new bride. Then he grimly stayed awake all that night, expecting a visitation from the ghost. None came. For a week, Cain waited on edge for Ishi to appear, but her ghost had vanished. Relieved, Cain decided it was safe to bring Aiko and her family to see the home in which she would soon live. Proudly, he showed them each room in the house. Aiko was very much taken with the sleeping room and lingered there while Cain took her parents out to the garden. As he escorted Aiko's parents back into the house, he felt a hand on his arm, pulling him back into the garden. Cain turned and found himself face to face with a young, beautiful Ishi who kissed him and whispered a single word in his ear. Vengeance. You're back, Element? Laughing lightly, Ishi danced away, waving once toward the sleeping room window. Still in shock from the encounter, Cain turned and saw Aiko silhouetted in the window, a look of bitter betrayal on her lovely face.
I already finished the cans.
Really?
Yeah.
Cain rushed indoors and tried to explain to his bride-to-be. The girl she had seen him kiss was a young cousin who was trying to make mischief, he told her. Aiko was placated, but from that time on did not trust Cain.
You know it's 4 o'clock now, right?
Yeah.
No time change.
Yeah, went forward. I know.
Hi, Tracy Klaus.
You know.
Well, good night.
Wait, let me just mute for a moment.
Look at that.
Let's see. What was she doing when you picked her up that you didn't want her to do?
Picked her up over so she would follow Grandpa.
Show them your hand. Garnet's a sweetie, but boy,
Yeah, she done did that.
she just did that. Because Lexi picked her up so that she wouldn't follow Dave into the bedroom. And she didn't want. She wanted Lexi to put her down so she could run in there. She is a little brat sometimes. She's so sensitive. She gets up on the counter and I go over there and I'll just pick her up and she yeah, sometimes, I mean, she just doesn't, she fights back. I don't know why. You're not even doing anything. All you're doing is telling her no. I don't know why she's like that. Other than that, she's so sweet. We all love her so much.
Yeah, for now.
She's got the sweetest, thing about her, but this biting and scratching, if she doesn't get her way, it's like she always feels like she has to fight you no matter what. If you're not letting her do something. Fearing that Aiko might end the betrothal, Cain pressed forward with his suit, arranging for a grand engagement feast to prove his devotion to her. Friends, neighbors, and family came to the banquet hall and made merry over food and wine. Cain was pleased with the success of his feast. Aiko was smiling and warm, as she had not been since visiting his house. But when he looked up, he saw the beautiful young Ishi come into the room and stand demurely in the corner, facing him. Cain tried to distract Aiko so she would not notice Ishi, but Aiko was made suspicious by his sudden nervousness, and she drew away from him. Oh, wow, Elemen, really?
What?
Said a feral cat came in my house today, knocked stuff down, and was crazy.
Sounds like Garnet.
You okay?
Yep.
I know that really hurt Lexi because she said, Grandma, help. And she never has had to ask me for help with Garnet. Across the room, Ishi laughed softly and began to change, her beautiful body twisting and breaking before Cain's eyes, her face collapsing inward and bleeding, her black hair tangling with seaweed, her eyeball popping out of its socket. Vengeance. Oh, wow, LM. Wow. Yeah, you could put some peroxide on it. There's some in the bathroom under the sink. Vengeance, she whispered, reaching a hand toward Cain caressingly. Cain shouted, No, leave here at once. Around him, Aiko, her parents, and their guests stared at Cain, puzzled by his behavior. None of them could see the ghost. Drawing his sword, Cain leapt over the table and attacked the ghost of Ishi, who laughed merrily and grew larger and larger before his eyes. Several of Cain's friends grabbed him and tried to wrestle the sword away, but he shook them all off. The ghost of Ishi drifted out the door and Cain followed her, shouting that she would haunt him no more. Ishi's ghost ran away from the banquet hall along the cliff path, the way she had once before walked with her husband. Cain ran after her, shouting and cursing. Suddenly, the ghost turned at the spot where Cain had pushed her over the cliff. She rose up and up, growing as tall as a tree, her face crushed and bloody, the eyeball swaying, and her shattered teeth gleaming in the moonlight. Vengeance, she screamed, lunging at Cain. The samurai yelled in fear and dodged away from the ghost. His foot slipped on the loose earth at the edge of the cliff. He pinwheeled his arms for a moment, trying to regain his balance, and then fell backward over the edge. Cain's samurai friends found his broken body on the beach, and they buried him beside Ishi. That same night, a terrible storm beat against the house where Cain had brought his new bride from Tokyo. A lightning bolt hit the roof, and the house burned to the ground. The neighbors claimed they could hear a voice in the foul wind that blew that night, saying one word over and over: vengeance. Yeah, she'll be okay, Tracy, but yeah, those nails hurt. You guys know that. This one is called Llorona. Wait. It's in Riverside, California. Oh, it's Llorona. Let's see what it says in the beginning. I can't make out the name the way they've written it. It looks like Slorona. I don't know. Oh, maybe when it's printed, I'll be able to see what it is. The feeling crept up on him slowly. Never did, no. I never did watch that. I might sometime, though. Let me do my inhaler real quick, okay?
Yeah, of course.
That's the empty one. Forgot I had it here in my purse. It's on Netflix? Okay. So it's pretty good? I'll move over here. I like to keep it in my purse when I go away. The feeling crept on him slowly. At first, he did not even realize that he was shying away from shadows, hurrying to get home before dark, glancing over his shoulder as if he expected to see someone following him. When he did notice these things, he had no explanation for them. He was a retired widower. The days and nights loomed endlessly since he had grown too old to weave shawls, and they were lonely too, now that his wife was no longer there to share them. But his health was good. He had many friends, and his children all lived close to him. So why this feeling of impending doom? He tried to laugh off the foreboding. After all, he had always had good luck. He was the one who found money on the street, the one who had won, the one who won free drinks at the local festivals, the one who always landed on his feet. Things had gone well for him all his life, but he had noticed that lately his luck had changed. He began losing things: his glasses, his wallet, the keys to his house. He tripped over his own feet and fell up the stairs. He caught the influenza before anyone else. When he tried to hang a picture on his wall, the small mirror beside it fell and broke into a million pieces. 7 years bad luck, he mused as he swept up the mess and threw away the shards of glass. To make things worse, he started feeling as if something was dogging his steps. Every time he went out of his house, his neck prickled as if it sensed that someone was watching him. He kept turning around as he walked to see someone following him, but no one was there. His eldest son teased him gently about his strange way of walking, saying that if he were not careful, people would think him senile. "Something's coming for me," he told his old friend Lupe as they sat one evening playing checkers on his porch. "Something bad." "Good morning," easily distracted. "Don't be crazy," Lupe replied. "You're just having some bad luck. Come to my house on Sunday night. We're having company over. You can relax, have a drink, and enjoy yourself. It'll take your mind off your troubles." He agreed reluctantly. Usually he liked visiting Lupe and his wife, but for some reason, the thought of walking across town after dark made him nervous. His sleep was restless that night, broken by a soft, wailing cry from outside his house that kept jerking him back to consciousness. It sounded like the cry of a baby, or perhaps a tomcat, but when he got up to investigate, there was nothing there. He was heavy-eyed and irritable the next morning from lack of sleep. He grumbled to himself as he went to buy his weekly groceries. He had almost finished his shopping when he overheard a woman talking about the Llorona, Llorona. He froze, his hand clutching an orange, and strained to hear what the woman was saying. "There was a car accident last night," the woman told the shopkeeper. "Several local boys were killed. I heard that the night before the accident, two of the boys saw the Llorona walking among the shadows, weeping for her lost children. And the next day, their car hit a palm tree right where they saw the Llorona." The shopkeeper nodded her head. "Bad things always happen in that place where the Llorona appears." He stood in silence, clutching the orange, remembering the wailing sound that kept waking him in the night. Had it been the Llorona, the wailing woman? He had often heard the tale as a boy. The Llorona was a poor young girl who had loved a rich nobleman, and together they had 3 children. The girl wished to marry the nobleman, but he refused her. He told her that he might have considered marrying her had she not borne the 3 out of 3 out of wedlock children, which he considered it a disgrace. Can you believe that? His own children. The girl was determined to have the nobleman for her own, so she drowned her children to prove her love to him. But still he would not have her and married another. Mad with grief, the girl walked along the river, weeping and calling for her children, but they were gone, so she drowned herself. For her crime, her spirit was condemned to wander the waterways, weeping and searching for her children until the end of time. It was said that whenever the wailing woman appeared, someone would die. He shuddered at the thought and hastily tucked the orange into his basket. After making his purchases, he hurried home. He put his groceries away and then spent some time searching his yard for signs of a stray cat or something that would explain the wailing noise that had disturbed him the night before. He found nothing. Here's the illustration of the Llorona. He lay awake for a while that night, straining to hear a wailing sound, but the only noise was the rustle of the wind in the palms outside his house. He drifted to sleep at last and awoke with a pounding heart early on Sunday morning. Had he heard a cry? The sound came again, and he laughed aloud. It was the clink of the milk bottles being delivered next door. He turned over and slept. Sunday evening found him huddled in a warm armchair, listening to Lupe Flores chatter with his guests. Many of them knew the boys who had been killed in the car accident, and the talk that night was of the Llorona. Someone pulled out a guitar and sang a song about a wailing woman that left many in tears. It wasn't until the last guest had disappeared through the front door that he stirred from his chair. He shook the hands of Lupe and his wife and walked out into the dark night, the song about the Llorona echoing in his mind. He felt oddly at peace for the first time in weeks. No feeling of foreboding, no shying away from dark shadows. He strolled along the street, thumping his cane against the pavement and humming the Llorona song. It was nearly midnight. The street was dark, but the sky was clear, and the moon shimmered down upon the wrecked stone chimney of a small house that had burnt down a few weeks before. All that remained was the chimney and the blackened skeleton of the frame. Among the dark shadows of the ruined windows, a white mist began to gather. It moved out into the yard and became the figure of a lovely young girl dressed all in white. Long dark hair hung loose from her back, down her back. He stared at the girl, his heart thumping against his ribs. She moved gracefully, as if she were dancing, and began keeping pace with him along the road. He looked into her face, but she turned away from his gaze and began to weep. He suddenly felt very cold, and his hand trembled on top of the cane. The Llorona gave a moan of agony, and at the sound, a terrible pain shot through his left arm. Steel bands seemed to clamp around his chest. The cane slipped from his hand, and he crumpled into a heap on the ground. A long while later, he heard voices above him. They sounded as if they were coming from far away. He opened his eyes for a moment and saw Lupe and his wife bending over him. "Llorona," he said to his friend. "I saw the Llorona." "Hush," Lupe answered. "We've called for an ambulance." Behind Lupe's head, he saw a shimmering figure in white moving toward him. At first, he thought it was the Llorona. Then, as the woman bent over him, he recognized the beautiful face of his wife. He smiled and took hold of her outstretched hand. She lifted him up, and his spirit parted easily from his pain-wrecked body. Together they walked away, leaving Lupe and his wife to keep watch over his body until the ambulance came. From somewhere in the shadows, the Llorona gave a soft wail, but they were too involved with each other to pay attention. Oh, wow. That was a good one. Well, it's been over an hour, and it's almost, well, it is 4:30 now with the time change. So I'm going to go. That'll be it for tonight. But I thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you so much. Hope you guys liked it. Hope you're asleep if you wanted to be asleep. And if not, I hope you're having a great day. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Love y'all. Thank you for coming. Till next time. Good night, Monica. Hi, back door. Thanks for coming. Bye, guys. Jeanette, thank you. Tracy. You're welcome. Good night, guys.